thank you so much to all of you for being willing to share part of this day with me. This is a new topic for me. It has to do with some processes that are really vital to my own life, the processes of recognizing, sharing, and celebrating what I'm learning. So I'm going to translate these ideas into things that are usable for you as teachers, but I'm also going to describe some things that I hope are applicable to you as human beings. Because one of the things that we want to remember during a time like this is that we're supporting ourselves as well as those around us. If you've heard me before, I've probably talked about vocabulary. My research has to do with vocabulary, and really this whole presentation has to do with vocabulary and knowledge, because after all, vocabulary is the way in which we substantiate or we anchor our knowledge. Words are the ways in which we know things. And I think this quote from Dr. Seuss is a really important one. Turns out that after a certain point in life, what we learn, the new ideas that aren't prominent in day-to-day life, really come from texts. And whether those texts are bytes on a computer or a real life book, books are where we get new insights, new observations. Right now, all of us are generating new experiences, new feelings that we haven't experienced in a situation before in our lives. And until we've actually got something written down, it's really hard to reflect on those things. So what we know is that our knowledge is the best predictor of how well you're going to comprehend a text. But at the same time, the knowledge that we have emanates from text. That's why we read. Reading is not just an exercise that's a good thing to be doing. Reading is about learning things. And this is the time when we really want to recognize that learning is going on. We want records of what we've learned. We want to be able to share some of that learning now and also in the future when we reflect back on this time. So we read to know, and I want to point out, I'm sure all of these things are common knowledge at this point, but we need to keep feeding students information, things that they can learn from. It's not just exercises. I've been reading articles that are talking about how exercise books are just flying off the shelves in terms of some of the online stores. But we want students to be grappling with great literature, great informational text. And here are some sources where there's free information, where you can get information like at Audible. They've opened up their library. There's been some feedback in relation to this site, which has also opened up its library. It turns out they don't have all the permissions for the books, so go at your own risk. And you also have to do a lot of curating for students, but there are some excellent texts. One of my very favorite texts, Drawing from Memory by Alan Say, is on this site. And I also found this Martial Arts for Girls. So there's some interesting texts that are available. And I want to remind you that at Text Project, we've got everything at Text Project has always been and remains open access, which means it's free. But we have a variety of texts that help students, particularly those who are struggling in developing facility with the core vocabulary. That means the approximately 2,500 word families that occur the most in text. So there are texts that instantiate, they give those words a lot of credit, they appear more prominently than typical text is what I'm saying. So it's a great way for kids to get better at reading and also get better at more knowledge. The one series that we've just finished that I think is just fabulous, that I love, are the stories of words. So there's 16 books there. So each of these examples here represents, many, many different books. But in the stories of words series, there are stories about how places get their names, like toponyms. There are also how new inventions where do the words for new inventions come from? And how do words from different languages like Chinese come into English? And for those of you who have younger students or younger children, we also have a beginning reads program. So altogether, there's several hundred texts here. And I know that at the end, Amanda and Pa are going to talk a little bit about some of the materials that Pearson is providing so that students don't have to be in a holding pattern. They can be learning and growing as students, as knowledge developers. I'm a really big fan of small changes. And the things that I'm going to talk about today, I think, fall into this category of small changes. And at the end, I'm going to give you a chance to share your small change with me, and I'm going to give away some copies of my book. It may be a while before we actually get to a post office, but when we do, you'll be getting a number of you will be getting a copy of this book. Okay, so let's talk about this process of recognizing, sharing, and celebrating knowledge. For each of these dimensions, I'm going to talk about the what, the why, and then the how. So why is it important to recognize what I've learned? There's a dimension of learning or knowledge that's called metacognition. Knowing what I know can be really critical when I approach a new topic, when I look at an existing topic and I can build on what I already know about that. So another aspect of knowing why we read is important. Okay, so recognizing the role that text has and also what makes text unique and challenging. And I apologize for the typo there. When it comes onto my website, where you can take a look at it later, it will be corrected. But the point is that how I act as a reader. So we've come into this period of time promoted by some of the conclusions that people made about the Common Core State Standards that texts are often too hard for our students. Well, it turns out that most students can read the majority of the words, but what they don't realize is that in any text, there are always going to be 3 to 4 words that I haven't encountered before in every 100 words. That's an important understanding. So recognizing how I am to text in that task can be really important. Why is this important? Recognition that I know some things, that I have a sense of what's involved in learning to read a text or approaching a text, has to do with something called agency. It has to do with whether I feel like I'm in control of my learning. I can build on what I already know. I'm capable of learning from text. This dimension of agency really distinguishes between students who are very uninterested in school, who don't like to learn. It has to do with my understanding my capacity. And what I was saying earlier is that it turns out every text is going to have some hard words, every new text that you see, or at least some words you haven't encountered before. That doesn't mean you can't figure them out in the context of the text and with your decoding word recognition skills. And that's exactly what we're doing, is teaching you how to actually deal with text. So I've been talking about this, that every text has some words I haven't encountered, and I have the skills and strategies to figure out the unknown words. This is a really important sense of also when I know that I've learned something. You know, often kids come home from school, what did you do? Nothing. Well, when I know that I've learned something and I have some evidence of what I've learned, I can revisit that knowledge. I can also remember it, and I can use that knowledge as an anchor to deepen what I know about a topic. So, how do you help kids at this point in time recognize what they've learned or in the process of learning? I think the very best thing that we can do is have kids journal. And I think that's the very best thing that we can be doing at this point in time, too. I think these journals are going to be so valuable someday as an artifact of a really unusual time. It doesn't mean that the journals have to be shared with anybody. I had an experience as a high school student where we had a teacher. She was actually fired after her first year because she was just a little too innovative there in the early 1960s. But she graded us not on what we wrote, but how much we wrote. And that really has been a strategy that stayed with me through my life. I journal daily. And I think that these artifacts for individuals, and sometimes we might actually want to share them with others, is going to be a really important part of the experience that we're going through. So journals are one thing. I would love when students are sharing what they've been learning, that they're starting to collect a set of mind maps. I think mind mapping is the best way for individuals to categorize, to understand what they know, and to have some recognition of it. And I think you can get so incredibly inventive with mind maps. You know, you can have pictures, you can have photographs, you can have lines that go all over the place. Mind mapping is a central part of the practices in which I engage. I'm starting to write a new book on text complexity, and I use mind mapping as a central part of that. Wouldn't it be great for American kids to have a series of mind maps when they meet virtually, when they meet in person again someday soon, we hope, that record things that they've learned? There's documentation that I know some things. This wasn't just the time where we just were in a holding pattern. I actually used this time to get good at some areas of knowledge that I'm really interested in. These mind maps can be used with young children, and we can also do word maps where we take words that we found intriguing or that we know are important in particular kinds of text. At Text Project, we actually provide, there are these word maps for teachers, but there are also forms for kids to use. So we can be expanding our vocabulary, and we can be recognizing all the different words that we've learned. And we can also be recognizing how words are connected derivationally or through compounds. So we can have some ways to say, wow, I increased my vocabulary during this time. I think that that can be a really powerful thing for kids to have some artifact. So it's not just an ephemeral thing, I learned some words, but here are some of the words that I actually learned. I love these diagrams and illustrations. I think that they're just stunning to think of adding some creativity. And you know, some of this can be done on cardboard. I know that there are kids that don't have the reams of paper that some of this might require. But you know, if you have some bags or cardboard, some kind of something where you can make a record. And there are also ways in which we can do this digitally, of course. Now, I'm going to give you throughout this talk an example. Now, this illustrates that we can also keep track of things with graphs. You know, we can keep track of how many words we've been reading, how many books we've read. My personal preference is that we document what we've gained from text with artifacts that bring out the big ideas from those texts. I'm going to give you an example of something that I'm working on right now that is a challenge for me. And I want to show you how I go about doing this. This has been a really challenging past quarter for a number of reasons for me, not just our international situation, but also some personal things that have happened. And what I've been doing, so every week at those are weeks at the bottom. Every week I've been documenting whether I make my goal of 7,900 steps a day. And that red line is the baseline. So you can see I've been doing pretty well with that. And I also keep a record of the fact that I've climbed at least 8 sets of stairs a day. Okay, and as you can see here, I've been pretty successful with that. Now, when I might bemoan certain things that I haven't been doing at this time, this is really valuable for me to take a look at and to say, I did that. I was successful with this. Okay, so I'm just saying there are different forms of recognition. And I think for us personally, it can be important to recognize some things that might be challenging for us. For example, did I do my journaling every day or at least a couple days a week? And I really, really caution people not to have really, really unrealistic goals. One of my friends says, well, you don't have to bring too many groceries over here because I'm going to be losing 10 pounds during this sheltering in place. And I'm kind of going, not a great idea. But continuing to do some exercise, I think that's an important thing. Reaching out to friends, keeping a record of some of that. So you're actually saying, wow, it's been tough, but here's some evidence that there were some things that I did that I really liked doing, and I'm proud that I did them. Okay, sharing is an incredibly important part of who we are as human beings. And I think in many of our homes, we're really seeing, the need to share and reach out when our social group gets more and more limited in terms of our own homes. But through sharing in our virtual classrooms, it can be in writing, it can be in interacting with one another, but sharing is a way in which we get new perspectives from other people, and we also get to see what it is that I've contributed to the situation. It can involve artifacts, such as the things I've just talked about, but it's a really important part of our ability to engage and retain knowledge. So being able to say, look what I did. And I'm not talking about this as a competition or, like I win. I'm saying, for example, when I shared with you my steps, somebody else was going to say, well, you didn't do the 10,000. And that's true, I didn't. I had a more modest goal. And I'm going to share with you in just a minute why that is. But it's been important to me. And I'm just saying that has increased my energy now that I know that all of you know about this, to actually keep doing this. Sharing can also support students' understanding of what's relevant and what they know in specific domains. And it can really be a source for new perspectives on content. Now, how do we share? All of the things that I just showed you, those artifacts, can be ways in which we can share with others. But I wanted to bring in 2 additional ways of sharing that I think are really relevant to our 21st century kids. One of them is making books. I think it would be so incredible when we reconvene in school communities physically, if in classrooms and in school libraries, we had special shelves allocated for the books that have been written during this time. And what I'm showing you here are some books that are kind of made from found objects. So the one on the right is made from paper bags, and the one on the left from folders. Again, all kids might not have access to things like this, but let's be inventive. I'm a great fan of David Sedaris's journals, and David Sedaris has a lot of found objects that he makes as part of his journals. But I think essays, I think if you can have, private sites where kids can share some of this. This happens to be, Teen Inc. happens to be a site that kids have to submit to. But I think to have things that, doesn't mean that you're going to share everything, like maybe your journal is just for you, but there are going to be places where I can actually give people an indication what I've been doing. Now, this idea I just absolutely love. I found a website with pictures just taken by kids. And some of these, the ones on the two bottom corners, are summaries of experiments kids have been doing. The one on the top right is an example of a kid doing an art project, and I'm not quite sure what the child was trying to do with the cat here in the middle. But are there places in our private Pinterest, Instagram, or whatever our virtual classrooms are, where kids could actually share some of the things that they're documenting as part of their learning experiences? Here are some pictures taken by teenagers, and I like the ones on the right a lot because they were making use of their younger siblings' little miniature people and animals. The one on the top is actually a picture of food. It's cauliflower, if you haven't figured it out that they're climbing. Okay, so what I've been suggesting here is that ways of sharing some experience we've had or what we're learning through photographs. I mean, not everybody may have access, but there are a lot of phones with cameras on them out there that kids might be able to do some of that. Now, here's my own sharing process. So I told you about the 7,900 steps daily. Well, my goal over the next decade is to walk from the North to the South Pole. Now, I recognize that this is not a true map in terms of the topography, but you see the little lines there. There are a line for every year of the decade. I'm in my second year of this decade. And what you see here is that by the end of June, when this year finishes for me, I actually am well on my way to getting to the South Pole. And I picked 7,900 steps, which seemed like a doable thing. And that would get me to the South Pole. And why 8 stairs a day? Well, it turns out, I mean, most of you are doing this. I just happen to be sharing this. I mean, most people walk that amount every day or climb this many stairs, but I've been documenting it. And for me, it's just given a whole nother level for my interest in my engagement in this project. But that's me at the top of Mount Everest. So if I walk 8 stairs a day, that's the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest. Of course, I don't need the oxygen when I'm getting right close to the top. And I'm actually, a little above Everest now because I've already made my goal for this year. Okay, so how can we celebrate? I found an educator who said that celebration really needs to be the 4th stage of the education cycle. We plan, we implement, we evaluate, and then we celebrate. Celebrations can be events, they can be activities, but one of the things that I've really learned, I'm a devotee of these tiny habits, hence the small changes. But Professor Fogg talks a lot about when I've been successful. For example, when I finished the section of the book that I was allocated for today, I actually raise my arms up and go, hooray. And even something like that can can make you a little bit more upbeat at a time when you might not want to be upbeat. And what the people who do research on this, the social psychologists, say is don't wait just till the end of the goal, but use milestones. And I think for kids at this point, figuring out how to focus and be able to monitor oneself, those are really big things. And so celebrating what it was that we did, I think can be immensely important. Okay, why are we doing that? Celebrations infuse our life with passion, purpose. These are usually the things that we remember. They help create community among learners, and people have noted that it's especially critical with linguistic and culturally diverse students because it validates their unique contributions and accomplishments. How might you celebrate? My ideas aren't as rich on this dimension. I could really use some suggestions, but one of the things I've always been interested in are badges. And what I'm thinking is, could you actually, this one is an example of an adult educator generated badges. You know, I read these many FYIs for kids. I made a map of them. And you know what? I chose a topic and wrote my own. Okay. And together with decorating your badges, you could also add a picture of yourself celebrating your victory. Okay. I think that that could have some incentive if we had a common shared place where we could actually share some of our accomplishments. Here's another one that a student has developed where they're reading some books on planets, making a comparison about the planets, and then writing a story. And again, having a picture of you engaged in a celebration. Now, I want to also be clear that when we haven't made the progress we wanted to, that needs to be recognized as well. And I really want to emphasize here today that sometimes it can be our expectations. You know, I think sometimes in education, we'll focus so much on what should have happened or could have happened, but didn't happen. And what I'm saying now is that we need to really be monitoring our expectations at this time. Are they reasonable? Is this something that you could be successful with? My friend losing the 10 pounds, I'm kind of dubious about that. And I think it's just a setup for failure. Now, one of the things that I do weekly as part of my personal practice is I look at my week and the goals that I made and those that I didn't. And I write about what I'm proud about. And I also reflect on why didn't some of those other things happen that I wanted to have happen? Did I put too much on my plate? Was there something that I was avoiding? Is there something that I can do a little differently next week? So I'm saying when we look at our goals and the celebration of those goals, we also need to say, wow, you know, yesterday, and this is the truth, I didn't quite make the 7,900 steps. Okay, and why was that? What were the things that happened? Well, I was getting ready for this webinar. It's new content. I was working hard on it, trying to find some more celebration activities, actually. And so I didn't do that. Well, okay. Now, what could I do today to make sure that I do get my steps in? Okay, so here's how I celebrated on Sunday when I had finished the first quarter of this year. I actually bought the movie Little Women. And if you're thinking about doing that, I would actually advise you to maybe hold off. I wasn't as thrilled about it as the last one. But you know what I did? I love reading journals. I love reading how people came to write the things they did. And I have a collection of writers' journals. And I found my journals of Louisa May Alcott. And I read sections of when she was writing Little Women. And if you love Little Women, please, of the movie, please forgive my review. I'm not saying don't watch it. I'm just saying there were some parts that I liked the previous one a little bit better. Okay, so what do we do today? We recognize, just by showing up here, we recognize that we are committed to learning. I recognized I was committed to learning by doing something different. This is not my typical topic. You know, I do vocabulary. And this time I was talking about something that is a little bit beyond what I usually do, but it's part of the experiences that I have. I shared what I've learned about recognition, sharing, and celebration. And now it's time for you to share what you've learned. So if we could have some questions now, that would be fabulous.
We do have a couple of questions already.
Okay.
Want to take them now, or do you want to just do what you want to do, and then I can?
Well, I wanted to do the celebration after I have a celebration for our webinar, but I wanted to do it after we'd shared what we learned. So I'm kind of trying to go that we recognize that we were here learning something. Now we could share what we learned or what we wish we had learned. You know, is there something that is kind of vague or you didn't understand, or You
Yep.
have some ideas.
Yep. So we have the first question from Kara. Do you have any suggestions for how to make badges virtually?
That's a really, really good question. I don't. You can certainly use my patterns, and kids will need to write on them. I mean, it may be that you could actually show them to the kids, and then they could decide what shapes they were going to do and make them. Do I know of a website that creates badges? That's something I can look into. That's a really good question, and I apologize that I didn't have that handled.
Nope, that's great. That's great. Those are great suggestions. And sometimes we don't have to have answers to everything. It's a great opportunity for some of us to do research and find what's out there too. So I love the question and I love your response, Freddie. The second question is from Vicky. What are your thoughts on interactive notebooks?
I think that those can be really great. Are we? I don't know, Vicki, if you're talking about kids interacting with each other or whether you're talking about the teacher interacting with the student. I think that that's even a different kind of activity than the one I was describing. I mean, I think it really has an important place. I think as we're getting ourselves into a new learning space, we're going to have to figure out again, like the badges, how are you going to do that? And I think maybe online there are some pretty easy ways to do that. But I also think that there's a place right now for journaling for kids who don't write a whole lot, even drawing pictures, So I'm all for interactive journaling, but I'm also saying that there might be a role right now for some kids keeping their own journals as well.
That's great. The next question is from Stacy. I'm intrigued by the badge idea and incorporating it into goal setting. Do you feel that goal setting has a role in our current situation?
That is, Stacy, thank you. I think goal setting is possibly the best thing we could be teaching kids right now. And clearly, if we go back to these badges, right? I mean, there were, there are goals here, and that's probably what's the most important. And I mean, I use mind maps, mind maps. I use them a lot to look at the pieces of a project. And I think that could be a really valuable thing that we could demonstrate to students. I think that, yes, I mean, this is all about goal setting, what I've been talking about today. Setting a goal for what I'm going to learn, and then recognizing what I've learned, sharing what I've learned, and celebrating it. So, I'd love to do, Pa, if we could do it, I'd love to do another session on goal setting.
That sounds great.
Because this is something that I have spent, about as long as I've been in education. I've been a student. I've gone to a lot of seminars, and I don't usually get to talk about these things that I do in my own life. But I think helping kids understand how to set goals and learning how to focus at this time, I think I was on a little webinar the other day. I'm trying to do a webinar a week on a content area that I don't know about. And I was on a webinar where somebody was talking about ways in which, you could make small goals and implement those, especially, not relying too heavily on media that gets you more anxious. So I think that idea of setting small goals, that would be a great thing to talk about. Yes, this is all about goal setting and then recognizing who actually made them. Yeah.
And we have a question from Heather. This is actually perfect. Can the setback or disappointment be done privately or shared in a group? What's the most effective way of sharing?
That's again a really, really great question. I remember telling somebody about my goal setting process, and they said, well, boy, aren't you just setting yourself up? Because what if you don't get all of it done? And from my perspective, it's never about getting all of it done. It's looking at what I did and then recognizing what I did. Does that have to be done in a public situation? I don't think it does at all. I think students writing about what they were successful at. One of the things that I did today, because I'm needing to really revisit a lot of these strategies. So what I did today is, what was I proud of that I did yesterday? Okay, and I actually make a little table. What I did yesterday, and how could I extend that activity that was successful today? Okay, that can be a really good thing. So, you know, I got so and so many of my pages read, and today I'm going to extend that by, you know, one more page today, something like that. So no, I don't think that this is something where we're publicly doing it. But in the vocabulary book, I've actually written about how teachers can make explicit their goals for the class, and then we actually have ways of documenting our progress on a goal. And then we can talk about times when we made part of it, but not all of it. I think what I'm suggesting here, I'm not trying to do an airy-fairy thing here by saying, oh, be proud of anything. I'm saying I think we're realistic to say, wow, you know, like my steps, you know, I didn't do 10,000 a day, you know, but I've made it into another kind of game. And I think that recognizing what we've done and how we can do something, build on what we have done, I think is what I'm talking about. How can we build on what we've done?
Great. And I wanted to actually just mention really quickly that Brecken, one of the participants, actually put into the comments section that Canva and Credly can help you make digital badges. It's easy, and he uses it, or she uses it for their kids. And Faith also said addcredible.com is a website that can help you make badges. So thank you for those two comments, and I'm sure it'll be helpful for others.
So everybody see those, Pa?
Pardon?
Is everybody able to see those?
You know, I actually don't know, but what we can do is we can put this in the follow-up email so that you actually have access to it. Okay. I don't know if everybody can see everyone's questions. Sometimes it comes just directly to us.
Okay.
We have a question from Kiayam. I'm not sure if I'm saying the name correctly. Hi there, should kids journal a minimum time daily, for example, 20 minutes, or how do we do this? Any suggestions?
Well, that's an interesting question. I feel the same way about when we ask kids to do certain amounts of reading. I mean, for some kids, writing a paragraph is going to be a big deal. And it may actually be for some kids, my diagram, you know, with the mapping my steps, could be a first step to just say, you know, I started out journaling today and I wrote 100 words. You know, my goal now is to keep doing that for a while because I'm really proud of that. I would rather make journaling be like, I'm going to do a paragraph, or I'm going to do a page, or I'm going to draw. For younger kids, I'm going to draw a picture, or for some kids, I'm going to, you know, make a little cartoon of what's been happening to me this past week. You know, I don't want to put it in a specific time, but I want them to be able to reflect on what it was they did. So in other words, you know, let's look at what you did and let's see if you can see some progress in what you did. So yeah, I'm kind of reluctant to say a certain amount of time. I don't know. 20 minutes journaling is a long time, by the way. I mean, I work on a website called 750.com, and you don't have to do that. You can do it on a piece of paper, but their thing is write 750 words a day, which is about 3 pages. And if some of you know about Julia Cameron's artist way, she talks about writing 3 pages. So I think I'd prefer, I never really thought about this. I mean, for my own practice, I write a certain number of pages. And sometimes, when I talked about this high school teacher, counting the words, we could actually keep writing the same word over until you kind of got tired of it. I don't know, but I'm not suggesting that. But I am saying I use a certain number of words a day.
Great. And we have 3 more questions left. I know we only have a minute left. So the first question is, if students who struggle with decoding or fluency at the high school level struggle to select an online text which captures their attention and perhaps motivates them to independently read, can you provide a set of 4 or 10 high interest and maybe varied genre texts? The vocabulary of these students average in the 3rd to 5th grade level. What are your thoughts?
Well, actually, those texts that I showed you at Text Project are perfect for those students. Not the beginning reads, but the FYIs. And the FYIs, there are about 100 of them, and they're on a lot of different topics. They're written to instantiate, to repeat the vocabulary that's foundational, that you should be developing in the primary grades, through grade 3. So I think that I'd really recommend going to that. One of the things that I think this event is uncovering, I've always been told, I live very close to Silicon Valley, and there'll be people there that always tell me you can get all these free texts online for students. And that simply isn't the case, to get really great texts online for free, which is why I was, giving you some of those sites. For some of these kids who are not really great readers, this would be a good time to get them involved in some of these Audible books that they can listen to. But the Text Project texts are going to be perfect for those students. And I think, Pa, you're going to tell them that there's some text that that myPerspectives is opening up, or not?
Yes, we do have some free resources. So Amanda will actually end the webinar giving the website and some of those free resources we have. One final question that just came in from Angela. How often during the lesson should we have a celebration?
Well, I think it just depends on whether you want to, often we leave the celebrations till the really end of the year, or end of a month, or end of a week. So for our events right now, I mean, we might be doing a mini celebration, after 10 minutes, just saying, let's wave our hands in the air and just say, hooray. Or I find that my spouse and I have been doing a lot more dancing recently. And I'm going to show you one of the ways in which I celebrate. So if there's been something that you've done as a group that has been, is something new that you've done, do a mini little celebration. So here's the one that I'm going to share with you today. This is my go-to music for celebrating. So I'm celebrating the fact that you are on here, and while we're playing this, and we're not going to play the whole thing, but I'm going to give you an email address that you can write your small change to if you want a copy of the book, and I'll give it away at least 3. Typically, I'll give away many more than that. So,
and Freddie, are you sharing something on your screen?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to give control right back to you. Hold on.
This is my celebration. This is what I use when I finish my writing day. So
I love it, Freddie.
When you look at this book, Teaching Words and How They Work, you can think that almost every page ended with that or "We are the champions." Yeah, that's my go-to. So I just shared a little bit about myself today, and I was celebrating the fact that I tried something different. And I want to thank all of you who were with me today to experience this. And I would love to do something on goal setting, Pa, if people are interested in it.
Absolutely. We've got some people who are already excited and can't wait for the next one. So Amanda's going to close it out. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Freddie.
My pleasure. Thanks for what all of you people are doing out there. I hope that we're going to have a greater appreciation for America's teachers, health workers, and teachers. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Freddie, for your thoughtful and inspiring words today. I just wanted to make everyone aware that we do have our website where you can access free digital demo accounts. You can go to pearsonschool.com/literacy to find those. In addition, we do have also, for teachers already using our program or want access to additional resources to support distance learning, we have free resources available on our website, mypearsontraining.com/coronavirus, or just go to pearsonschool.com and click on the orange banner at the top. You'll get access to reading and writing packets, digital novels, grammar sheets, and skills activities, and more. And you can download right now, no sign-ins required. Thank you so much again, Freddie. And to all the attendees, you will be getting a professional development certificate